Oh, hi there. Welcome to Shogi in the West, an English language podcast for active Shogi players and Shogi learners around the world. In this podcast, we focus on the topics and the people that matter to those of us outside Japan trying to make our way in this game. And before I start today's show, I would like to make a brief public service announcement. This is now, as you'll see, going to be the second solo podcast episode in a row. And I only have one person remaining in my interview queue. And so if you are interested in being a guest and you want to see more interview style podcasts, please contact me and let's get recording. I personally love the interview episodes, since it's a chance for me to hear the thoughts of Shogi players besides my own internal thoughts and monologue. I feel it sort of puts me in touch with the Shogi players and Shogi itself around the country and the world. Like I said, I really enjoy them. Don't worry about skill. Don't worry about your experience. If you have thoughts on Shogi and you play Shogi and you're trying to learn, I'd love to hear from you. So that's it. That's it for the PSA. Today's topic now involves an aspect of Shogi learning and Shogi growth that I continually debate in my own head as to its usefulness. Most players I know, I don't know if you can see Atari, if you're watching, if you can see her in the reflection, but she's walking. Our cat, Atari, is walking. Most players I know, I guess, at least those vocal, the players that are vocal about the subject, rave about its importance, though. In fact, it almost feels like it's one of those aspects of Shogi that is never questioned as to its value. And those are the types of things I like to question. The subject, of course, is post-game analysis and game review in general. So, strap in, grab your favorite podcast beverage, whatever that is, and let's talk about it. As always, I would love to hear your comments. Please don't hesitate to respond via YouTube comments or directly through email, shogidad81@gmail.com, or on the Discord. And, I'd just like to hear back. And then I can potentially in subsequent episodes talk about these or bring these up as recurring topics. So anyway, why do we do game review? Sort of what is the case for post-game analysis? And I guess, we can start with the conventional wisdom. Just basically, reviewing your games helps you improve. That's the conventional wisdom. How does that work? How do we at least think that works? So people that believe in review and post-game analysis, what is it about reviewing your games that helps you improve? I guess just brain dumping some of these. It assists with pattern recognition. I think that's anytime you look at something and then you look at it again, you improve your pattern recognition. I think that's at a basic level some of the foundation between sort of repetitive learning. But when you come back, you revisit your moves across game reviews, you start to see potentially, the dream is you start to see your recurring habits, good or bad. Maybe you always bring your bishop out too early. Maybe you always push the rook pawn at an inopportune moment, or maybe you don't push the rook pawn fast enough. I think that's something for me that when I'm reviewing the games, So often, even now after I have had these ideas reinforced to me, I still don't completely internalize the power of the static rook pawn pushing it to clash with the other pawn up the board, even when it looks like things are scary on the other side. It's such a strong move, but I still don't internalize it. So you see these over time. These types of patterns are the ones that might be somewhat invisible to you during play, but when you see it over and over again in review, in hindsight, it's illuminated. So like pattern recognition, I guess, error correction, where post-game analysis helps you to sort of identify your errors, your tactical blunders, your strategic misjudgments, you missed opportunities both in attack and defense. In a game of shogi, there are so many decisions to be made, and every decision, even the ones that are good, could potentially be second guessed, or could potentially be opportunities for other plans or for other moves. So, it might not necessarily be an error correction, but it could be a correction. And, the idea is, I think the idea is that if we review and we continue to review these things and we continue to see these errors, we will not be making these errors at the board. Again, I'm trying to take all these arguments and convert the ideas, like we're going to improve our pattern recognition, we're going to improve our error correction. Like I'm trying to take these ideas and think about how it actually would work. Like, does it work? Or are we just telling ourselves these things will happen? But anyway, I suppose, that's it. In a game review or post-game analysis, it is an opportunity to learn from a loss. And you can learn from your wins too, but learning from a loss is sort of the time-honored tradition of getting better. You lose a lot, and the idea is you see these ways that you're losing and you correct them in the future. You can reveal all sorts of your problems. Like I said, with the errors, you can identify, oh, maybe I'm just missing lots of tactics, or maybe I'm missing endgame. Maybe I'm doing great in my opening, but once I get an advantage, I don't know how to convert an endgame. Maybe you see that, and the pain of those losses will force you to work on your endgame, for example. Or say you've been working on your endgame and you're just continually getting tricked out of the opening. And, that's frustrating. That's speaking from experience, that's a frustrating place to be when you're getting busted out of the opening. As anyone who's watched my stream, especially lately, knows, I still struggle against bogeying. My opening is not necessarily the ideal against bogeying, but I struggle against it. And a lot of these sharp lines, or lines that can get sharp, could lead to sort of painful losses. But hopefully those losses, the more painful they are, they can help for the future. Whether, I guess that's just trying to memorize new lines or trying to get the general ideas from some of these lines, who knows? But that's it. Also, in terms of learning from a loss, we've talked about this on the channel as well. Some of these losses can be very painful, and some of the games that I think about in my past, even going back years, that I still sort of kick myself over, or that I still have that sting of the loss for, those are the types of games where I've made moves where I did learn. Okay, so I missed this. I lost this game because I missed this checkmate. And now in review, I see, okay, I could have done this. I review the checkmate, and now that pattern just sort of gets ingrained by whatever mechanism the brain is using to ingrain that. That pattern, I will probably never miss that checkmate again. And that was years ago that I lost in this particular way. And so, it can help in that. When we're reviewing, especially when we're reviewing with other people in a post-game analysis, for example, you get an opportunity to see plans that you do not necessarily have in your brain. So you can, where you may have had during a game, you may have had a plan, and you might have thought that this was the best plan or whatnot. It certainly would not have been the only plan. And when your opponent starts discussing things or moving pieces or whatnot in PGA, that's where you can sort of see these other plans. And you can obviously learn from these plans, or you sort of augment your normal plan with this. So you might play a little bit more variety by learning from some of these plans by the way the other player is thinking. Sure, you can run these things through an engine, but in PGA, you're getting sort of a human idea of what humans might be looking for. And I think that can be sort of helpful. And in both ways, we're doing PGA and potentially with engine, you sort of build an intuition for a position. You get that sense of what shape or what feels right, and you can start to trust these instincts, even if you can't calculate your way through it all the time, especially at the board. And the more of these that you see, the more you just start to trust it, and you do it. You get wins. You may still not know why, but you sort of build that intuition. And I guess, as another similar line with building that intuition, I want to believe, and I think this is something that we tell ourselves, is that the more time that we reflect on our shogi, or the more time that we think about shogi, the better we're going to get at it. So review is sort of a way to improve by thinking about something. And, again, I'm not a neuroscientist. I don't know how the mechanism by which reflecting on a position or reflecting on a game strengthens our memory of that game. I don't know. But it seems like by reviewing these things, we are able to take these lessons and put them into our head a little more easily. And yeah, and I sort of along that line, when we're doing PGA and we're doing it with other people, that can be, for some people, it can be a very enjoyable experience. And so it's an enjoyable experience of spending more time thinking about shogi, reflecting about the game, reflecting on the moves. And the time that you spend doing that is only going to help. It is thinking about your moves is, well, I don't want to say it's only going to help, but it's probably going to help, especially if you enjoy it. I'm a firm believer that anything that you enjoy, you will get better at it more quickly than if you're doing something that you don't enjoy, in which case you may not get better at all, or you may just decline, because you've got to enjoy what you're doing. And at the end of the day, shogi is a game. And for some people, doing post-game analysis is more enjoyable than playing the game. There are some players who spend more time analyzing than they do playing. either in post-game analysis with someone else. I've witnessed some epic post-game analysis battles almost. I jokingly call them battle, but there are people that like that, and that's okay. The game, it's a game. There's no one way to enjoy it, whether it's studying it, whether it's reviewing it, whether it's playing it, whether it's collecting equipment. There are a million ways to love this game. And so in terms of why do post-game analysis? Because we like it, or because people love it. And you like to discuss with kindred spirits, what's going on the board. Excuse me. And if we don't review, what are some of the downsides, I suppose, that if we don't review? I think the general idea is, maybe this is a reversal of what I've already just said, but we'll repeat tactical blunders. So if we just play and we don't think deeply about some of these positions and some of these games, we don't review our mistakes, we may just continue to make those mistakes. And, I think that's a huge reason to do it. We have shogi books, we have books on the end game, we have books on every aspect of the game, some more approachable than others to those of us in the West. But just taking an endgame example, you could do an endgame book, but why not just do it from your own game? Here you have ready-made, actual, honest-to-goodness problem or problems that you've created in your own games. And you can learn from them, just like you can learn from a book. So that's great. But on the other side, there's also these types of problems are more important. I'll say the word. I'm not thinking of a better word than important, but they're more important. They're more relevant to you because they may actually come up multiple times because it happened in your game. So presumably you're playing the same sorts of positions in many of your games. And so the odds of you coming across one of your own problems in the future are higher than just a problem in a random book, for example. So, I think that's the kind of thing you'd miss out on without doing review. Without review, you may not understand why you won or why you lost. I think this is, for me, pretty relevant in that sometimes I come out of a game, sometimes I'll say maybe many times, I will come out of a game where I will feel that I played pretty well. I'll feel that my opponent played well. And I won't necessarily understand why they won or why I won. It'll just be like, we got into the middle game, and we pushed our pieces a bit. It got a little sharp, and I made some moves, or they made some moves, and I was faster, or they were faster. And these are some of the hardest games to review, to be fair. So it's not like reviewing or post-game analysis solves these problems, because I think these become the hardest games to review when you don't know why you won or you don't know why you're lost. But when you review these types of games, maybe you can come up with an idea at least. Here's something I could have thought more on, or here's something I was maybe wrong about, or here's a takeaway that I can make from this game. It might not have won me this game, but it might have improved my position a little bit. So that's something. Along the lines of repeating sort of tactical blunders, I guess, without review, we don't, or we may not internalize some of the key patterns of the game. And similar patterns and tactics, similar ideas, but not quite the same, I think, necessarily. So, I think that's one important aspect of review, is that we see the patterns, especially if we play the same sorts of openings as I do. We play the same openings throughout a lot of our games. We'll get to the same sorts of positions. We'll see the same sorts of patterns. And without reviewing those, maybe we will struggle to internalize those patterns. One other thing that I was thinking is that sort of without review, we may start developing, I don't want to say biases towards our games, but like, oh, I always do badly against, like I have this spot, I always do badly against bogeying, or oh, I always do badly against opposing rook. And I'm not saying that but I'm just setting up straw men or something like that, where we develop this bias if we play, and it's like you start feeling, okay, I've lost 1 against opposing rook. Okay, I lost 2 against opposing rook. You build this bias, and if you don't go back and study why you lost, those biases will become potentially, big hurdles for us, where it's just like, I don't know what to do against this thing. I'm just going to lose. And you lose before the game even starts. I think there's also the tendency without review, you can start doing things like calling it luck, blaming luck, or just like, oh, the opponent just happened to see that, or, I didn't happen to see this. Oh, it was lucky. But you review enough of these, you see, okay, well, my opponents are seeing this more often. Maybe it's not luck, or maybe it wasn't just, maybe it was a thing that I need to be aware of. So, that's really, I think when I think about why we review, I think that's sort of the reason why we review, why we do PGAs. I think that's about it. How should we then review efficiently or effectively? Let's say, and I'm still not, but let's say that you're convinced that this is an effective process: post-game analysis, game review. How do we review? So the first, there's a chess international master and a great educator, John Bartholomew. He gives this advice. I've heard this advice as well from other people, so it's not like he invented this advice, but replay the game with your own brain. With your own brain first. Review the game with your own brain first. Don't turn on the engine. I do, especially on stream where I'm trying to keep things moving. I will jump into the engine often first if I don't have any suggestions from the audience of what to focus on. But you try, and I've also heard this from Go people, but try to reconstruct the game from memory. So you're sitting there, think about the game, and try to think about, if you can't come up with the full game, obviously that's fine, but like, think about the positions that were important. Can you recall these important positions? And that's something that people do in PGA. It sort of reveals what you thought was important in the game, what you saw in the game. And when your opponent is doing this in PGA, it recalls what they thought was important, or what they thought they missed, or I missed, or whatever. And that way, you kind of put those two together, and you can see what each player might not have been thinking about. So it's sort of a give and take. That's the ideal. So you're both thinking, two brains are better than one. You're thinking in human terms. It's not quite like if your opponent says, oh, I should have done this. It's not quite like getting an engine, because you don't know it's true, air quotes, true. But it's an opportunity to think more about the position, and it lets you focus on, okay, well, I thought this was important. Here's this position I thought was important. And later on you see, well, no, it really wasn't important. What was actually important was this move 3 moves down the line. And so, that I think is helpful because you're using your own brain. And just like mentioned earlier on in this episode, thinking about the game, I have to believe, will lead to improvement in the game. So that's the key. You start with the opponent, you start with your own brain, and you go over the important aspects of the game. I think that's the first start of this. Some people suggest, and I've heard this from a number of chess grandmasters that are interviewed on chess podcasts, but they're a big believer in annotating your games. So you have an important game, and I've seen some strong shogi players do this, for example, after major tournaments, but like you've got your kifu, you remember your game, you record your game, or you record it at the time, and then you analyze the game. You literally write down your thoughts for each, or for the moves you thought were important. Am I making a threat? Am I defending it here? Is this move, am I flailing? Am I flailing or bluffing or whatever you call it? You think about that, and then you can go back and be like, okay, was this a reasonable thought? Was this an unreasonable thought? Or was it reasonable but wrong? How can I take these thoughts and apply them to my next game? It builds self-awareness for how you think about the game. And then, at that point, you've got these things. It's just still talking about annotate thoughts. That's where with PGA, you get the other player's thoughts. You get to share your thoughts. So you're sort of annotating your thoughts together. You're not explicitly annotating, but you're stating your thoughts to each other. You're having a conversation, and it's the same sort of idea. It helps build this awareness of the positions. And once that's done, say you go home or whatever, you're done with the opponent, turn on the engine. It's not truth. It's close to truth. It's not truth. And they can tell you, oh yeah, this tactic you missed. They can give you these ideas. They could tell you, you missed this one defensive resource. You missed this this move, which would force your way up in the corner. But again, as we always say, the engines, they can give you moves, they can give you variations, they can show you mistakes, but they can't tell you why moves are good. You can only try to intuit from these moves, why is it good? At this point, the engines, November in 2025, they cannot tell you why moves are good. They cannot explain strategy. So in the middle game, for example, these are the positions. Let me step back. Middle game positions, I often find to be some of the most difficult to review. They're subtle, there's pawn pushes, there's sort of meeting a threat with a threat, these subtle ideas that can escalate very quickly. And often there are many decent moves and many terrible moves. So it's hard to be like, oh, I could have done this. I could do, because if I could have pushed the second file pawn, maybe I could have also pushed the third file pawn. Maybe I could have also pushed the fourth file pawn. Maybe I could have also pushed the sixth file pawn. The engine will give you all these ideas, and they're all fine. But each of those moves has a different idea behind them. What makes each of those moves fine, or what makes each of those moves good, is essentially something that's going to happen later, because you're not outright winning a piece. You're just pushing your pawn. You're not, unless it's a tactical shot, but you're just moving these things. And you need an idea, as a human, you need an idea for why to do these. And the engine still can't give you that. So it's tough. In game review, use it sparingly, but I do recommend using it. You can ask, as part of your reviewing, ask yourself questions. This is sort of along the lines with annotating thoughts and sort of along the lines with discussing with your opponent. But you can you could look at the moves and ask yourself sort of thoughts. Why did I fear this pawn drop? Why did I take this pawn? Because I was afraid of it. Why was I afraid of it? Did I even consider dropping this pawn over, in this corner? Or did I even consider dropping the silver on the head of the king? Things like that. Did I even consider? And I think the idea there is that the more questions you ask, maybe the more insight you'll get into how you see the board, and maybe you'll have a bigger, more comprehensive view of these things. I think that's the idea. Yeah. So in terms of reviewing effectively, I think these are sort of ways to do it. And I guess as a benefit to review, speaking of effective review, as a benefit to it, you don't necessarily, to be effective, have to be sitting down and spending an entire hour or 2 hours. Some people recommend that. But it's not a game, so you could do this in bursts. You could review one game in a couple bursts. Like say you only have 5 minutes, or you only have you have a kid, or you have some other thing to do. Okay, I'm going to spend 10 minutes here. I'm going to spend 10 minutes here, look for just obvious big mistakes, and you talk about those. And then it's like, okay, well, later I'm going to spend another 10 minutes and look at the middle game stuff. And then later I'll spend 10 minutes and look at the opening. So something with the review is that you don't have to do it all in one sitting. So, it's nice in that regard. Or you could just, I think it's still effective, maybe not as effective, but you could decide, I'm going to analyze, I'm going to decide on however I decide. I'm going to decide on one critical moment, and I'm going to annotate that one critical, moment. And you can sort of get to the idea that I've said before, is that you want to have one takeaway for each game. And maybe that's a way when you're reviewing to get one takeaway. You decide, I'm going to annotate one critical moment. So now that we've discussed reviewing and tried to make a case for it, when doesn't it help? When doesn't it help? When doesn't post-game analysis help? And I still don't know where I come down on this argument of reviewing the benefit versus negative of reviewing, whether it's valuable or more valuable than just playing another game. I'll just say that I'm not sure. So thinking about ways that it might not help, there's sort of the risk of, I don't want to say burnout, but almost like a burnout risk. If you play a game, let's say you play an hour and a half long game with someone else, you're kind of mentally drained, but it's like there's that old Dunkin' Donuts, you got to make the donuts. I think it was he wakes up sort of like a zombie going, got to make the donuts. It's like, I played a game, I got to do my PGA. And so you play an exhausting game, you just kind of want to unwind, but now you've got this mental battle now that you have to wage with your opponent again after the game. And forcing that kind of PGA, I think, can ruin the fun of the game. It can ruin the fun. It runs the risk of making playing shogi a chore. If you know you have to do this thing after the game, if you know you're going to spend all your resources on a game, but you know you're also going to have to analyze after for another half hour or 30 minutes or hour or however long your opponent likes to do it, it becomes a chore. And you might say, well, maybe I just won't play. And then you start finding yourself playing less. And as a result, you get worse. If you're not playing and you're not reviewing, you're going to get worse. So I think that's a risk. I think it doesn't help when people in PGA, they want to, I've heard, and I can't remember who said this, but they want to relitigate the game. There are some people when they do PGA, like especially if they lose, but they go into PGA and they just start relitigating the game. They start making a bunch of moves. They go to a position that they thought they were good in, and they start making a different move, just really quickly going through, and then almost semi-obligating the opponent to start making new moves in response to his sort of new brilliant idea move. And so it becomes this replay almost of the game from a position where there are no stakes, but often the losing player, the person instigating this, is kind of imposing it on the other player. And it just becomes, it's like, okay, well, we played the game. What, are we playing another game? Are we playing another game from this position? I don't know. I think there are ways to do this that could make sense, but a lot of times I don't see that, because I watch WSL games, I watch a bunch of 81 Dojo games, and it is one of the reasons why I don't like to play on 81 Dojo as much, because there's this sort of implicit responsibility almost to review, especially if you're playing someone from the West, which I don't necessarily like to do all the time. So, but anyway, someone, you get the game, they switch the position, they just make moves really quickly. And then, oh, I could have done this, and then this, and then this. And, during the game, assuming it was like a 60-second Byoyomi game, you're going to be spending at least 60 seconds on some of these moves. And the idea that, okay, you went into PGA, and now you can just blitz moves out really quickly and come to some sort of understanding of, oh, this is how it should have been. I kind of find that nonsensical, because it's like you're spending so little time in PGA, but because it's in PGA, it's almost like people assume that it's correct. It's like, oh, I could have done this. I could have done this, then you would have done this, then I would have done this. And it's like, oh, yeah, you're right. Okay. But neither player is really giving this long, drawn-out thought process behind it. So you could be wrong. Like it's just you're kind of like spitballing. Like post-game analysis, a lot of times it seems like people are just spitballing and trying to, again, come up with some justification for why they lost, or what they could have done better, or what they could have done to make it an even game, air quotes, even game. And I don't find that particularly helpful, outside of the fact that thinking about shogi, even in a little bit, does help. But more importantly, I don't really enjoy that. Like, I don't enjoy seeing someone, especially if I won a game. If I won a game, if I win or lose, but if I won a game and I see my opponent just like spinning off into infinite variations at a point where they blundered, it's just like, I'm just watching. I'm just a spectator. And it's like, okay. It's like, yeah, okay, you could have won. It's just like you pat the opponent on the head. And it's like, okay, yeah, you could have won, and move on. And I just don't find those particularly enjoying. I think also when you do this kind of thing, or when reviewing maybe doesn't help as much, is that some people, I think, they get into these endless review loops almost. Always trying to find like the perfect play, and I don't think that really, for the most part, unless it's a pure tactic, that doesn't exist for humans anyway. And so it puts people, I think, into sort of an analysis paralysis. So it's like you infinitely study some of these games, especially some of the middle games, and you're grasping at straws. It's like you realize how much you don't know, how much of what you think you don't know. And this can lead, I think, to just hesitation in the future. And I think that's not good. Back to the PGAs, I think there becomes an emotional bias in some of these where, especially if you've lost, but regardless if you won or lost, you have different sides of the emotional bias. Reviewing a game when you're in that state, I think it distorts judgment. You could you could you could think that you could overvalue a blunder you made, like overvalue thinking this is why I lost, when it actually wasn't why you lost. Like it didn't help, but there was other things down the line that you could have gotten better at, like you could have recovered. And so you might be just blaming yourself. Your opponent might just be blaming themselves. And right after a game, I think it's hard to get this objective view of the game. So I think that limits some of the value because there is that bias in there. I don't know if this is true or false, but like I think it just as an idea, just spitballing ideas. The more you review, like if you're reviewing more than you're playing, my thinking is you might be always trying to play these correct, air quotes, correct moves instead of trying to experiment with moves or experiment with ideas or trust some of your instincts. So if you're analyzing all the time and you're not playing so much, once you do play, you might be almost like stuck in mud or stuck in quicksand where you're taking these skills from analysis into your game. But the games are timed. They're timed, and you can only make one move, and you can't overanalyze every move you make. So I think it might put you into some sort of like state where you're just not creatively thinking. So there's that, and then there's the counter arguments, I guess, to reviewing. So why it might not be useful is that a lot of people believe that playing will build intuition faster than reviewing. I've seen this on a number of chess podcasts. I'm always citing these chess podcasts, but I've heard coaches say that playing more games, even rapid and like blitz games, it helps build the pattern recognition faster than a slow post-mortem like analysis. It almost forces, it builds pattern recognition and decision making because you improve the more decisions you make. I want to say you get stronger at making decisions. So rather than slowly thinking about things analysis, you're building pattern recognition and you're improving your decision making. This isn't to say that you don't improve with analysis, but I think the argument is it's more effective to just play more. And also, the playing has a benefit for a lot of people, maybe most people, I would think, is that playing itself is more engaging than spending time looking at your mistakes and dissecting your errors. It's sort of the emotional bias again. When you review, and let's say you do it with an engine, and you see that you messed up, you blunder, like, oh, I had 5 blunders in this game, or I won this game, but I had 5 blunders. You sort of become disappointed and maybe potentially a little you become a little negative about your game, and that could lead to problems in actual games. I think that again is a problem, and there's something that Ben Feingold, Grandmaster Ben Feingold, a chess grandmaster and educator, he said, I think loosely, I have a quote, but basically, don't analyze blitz games, just play more. So, I think he's what is the word? What's the word? He's a contrarian a lot of times, and he says things. I'm looking for a word that's like clickbait, not necessarily clickbait. Well, I think he is clickbait as well, but like he's trying to incite or instigate thought, and I think that's the idea, especially as you get stronger. But at the lower level, a lot of this discussion depends on your level. Like at a lower level, probably worth more just to play rather than to analyze. Because you're not going to be able to analyze. You're not good enough to analyze a lot of times. So so that return on investment from reviewing may just be much lower than the return on investment from just playing more. And so I think that's often the decision or the discussion is PGA, is review. Is it as valuable as just going and playing another game? Like I could spend an hour reviewing this game with my opponent, or I could just spend another game. And in another game, I'm going to be thinking hard. I'm going to be, using these patterns that I just sort of felt and experienced, and maybe that's more effective. So I think that's some of the ways that review might not be so effective. And then in the end, it's not a yes or no problem. No, I'm not going to review. Yes, I'm going to review. There's a balance there. So what is the right balance for you or for me? Should I review every game? Should I review only the games I play over the board? Should I not review blitz games? Those types of questions. So I think the answer is it depends. I think in the end, what matters is intentionality. If you go in with the intent of improvement and the intent of dedicating yourself to your growth as a shogi player, if you do these PGAs or you do these reviews with that in mind, I think that's going to be more effective than if you are just doing it to do it. Just because someone said, play and review your games. The way to get better, play and review your games. So you do these reviews, but if you're not really intent in these reviews, you're probably not going to get much out of it. So only review when it serves your goals. If it's not serving your goals, don't do it. Skip it. If there's a game you're playing on 81 Dojo and your opponent wants to do PGA, just say, you know what, this was a great game. I'm exhausted. I'd like to go. It's okay. It's okay. Or just like what a lot of the Japanese players do, which is why I like playing them on it. If I play on 81 Dojo, I'll generally play the Japanese players. They win, they lose, they leave. Just like on Shogi Club 24. And so play people where you won't be pressured to review, I think is some of the way to find like a balance there. Some people love analysis, some people thrive on it, some people would prefer to do it than playing. Some other people just like to play. Some other people like to grow through intuition. So I think you have to ask yourself, am I learning from this? When you decide for you whether or not post-game analysis and reviews are worthwhile, you've got to ask, am I learning from this? Am I seeing actual benefits from this? Am I enjoying this? That, I think, is probably the most important thing. I probably should have said that first. Am I enjoying this? Because if you're not enjoying it, then it's going to negatively impact the effectiveness of the review, but it's also going to negatively impact your outlook on shogi, I feel. Is that if you start doing things in the shogi sphere that you don't enjoy, you're going to start not enjoying shogi as well overall. At least I believe that. I'm a big believer in getting better by doing things you enjoy and increasing your velocity by doing something that you enjoy. And then ask yourself, am I growing? So similar to am I learning, am I growing from this? Do I have any results that I can look at that show that I've learned here? So it's like, in this post-game analysis, I learned, from my opponent or whatever, I learned about the importance of pushing this rook pawn, let's say. And you won a game after that using these ideas. You could say, all right, I won this game. And you could even go as far as trying to track your wins. I know that there's someone who seems to document their Kifus in such a way. It's like, I won by this, I won by that. I lost by this, or I lost by that. So you categorize your Kifu so that you can go look at them after the fact of, okay, so this was I pushed through on static rook and I won. Or here's a section of Kifus of I lost to bogeying, or I lost because I panicked. This was a panic loss. And so you can say, okay, I've reviewed these games and now I'm losing fewer of these games in the future. So you can sort of see, am I growing? So, if the answer to these questions is yes, then yeah, keep doing it. And again, you enjoy it, which is one of the questions. The answer is yes, keep going. If not, just play. Like, it's a game. Just play. If you're enjoying the games, just play. I know, people who have gotten extremely strong without really reviewing their games much at all. Play. There's just I'm always talking about these chess podcasts, but you think about how kids are getting so good so fast in chess these days, and a lot of times it's because they're playing. They play, and then they just get better. You build those patterns, you build those ideas, you create new ideas, and you sort of learn. You learn almost by bashing your head against the wall a lot of times. But sometimes that's more useful than cerebrally thinking about, oh, I lost because there was this position and I could have done this, and I needed to apply pressure on this file. And rather than just ram your head against the wall a few times and you see like, oh, okay, well, I can't do that anymore. And there's this other area. And so I think that's a key thing that each person has to decide on their own. For me, I think my balance is more towards playing. I think my balance will always be more towards playing than it will be towards reviewing. This doesn't count doing tsume or hishi or things like that. This doesn't count like other book learning. This is strictly speaking of reviews and post-game analysis. As I've said before, I simply don't enjoy post-game analysis very much, especially online. Over the board, sometimes it's okay if, depending on the other person, everyone has their own level of skill when it comes to PGA. Some people are good at it. Some people are, I would say, bad at it. As I described earlier or discussed earlier with the people that want to relitigate the games or just want to make very quick moves. And, I don't find that very useful and I don't find that fun. So I don't like to review against those types of people. With some people, I do like to review, but to a reasonable extent. I want to, especially if it was a good game, win or lose. Especially if I lost, but win or lose, it's nice to just sort of tie a bow around the game. Okay, we've had this great game. Here were some of the things that happened in this game. Let's talk about this. Did we see this in the same way? And I think that's enjoyable. When I win, I feel a little sheepish, so I don't enjoy review when I've won as much, but it's different for different people. So you'll make your decision. I am curious. I know some people have some very strong thoughts on this. So, let me know them. I want to know what people like about PGA, what they don't like about it, what they believe about their reviews in terms of growth. Let's keep discussing this. I think it's a fun topic. I know that there are plenty of people who have strong feelings. So let me know. That's going to be it for this episode. So thank you for listening. And thank you in advance for commenting, and I hope we can continue this discussion. please do remember to like and subscribe the video, or like the video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't. And it will help you get more of this type of content going, and maybe help the algorithm a bit, get us a little bit in front of more people, get us more players, grow Shogi a little bit. That's the goal, growing the game and getting more people, more friends that we can play with. So, thank you. I will talk to you later, and enjoy your Shogi. And I hope you enjoyed this episode. Take care. Bye.